Hey everybody, Uncle Rich here for Who's Telling the Truth. Today is August 15th, but the show's not going to be shown until the 25th. But this is show 62, and it's called Conundrum. And you're going to say, well, why did you call it Conundrum? Well, first of all, because I think it's a dynamite-sounding word. I mean, how often do you find yourself in a conundrum? And, you know, so I went so far as to, to look it up. And I looked it up, I Googled it, and I think the first one was a Merriam-Webster dictionary, where it said a conundrum is a confusing and difficult problem or question. So I'm saying, what could be difficult, or what could be a difficult problem? So guys, one of the biggest problems facing us right now is global warming. And I want you to hear why this has turned into a conundrum. So John, hit the first clip.
The 18 warmest years on record have all happened since you graduates were born.
John, play that one again, just so everybody can clearly hear what the president has to say. Go ahead.
The 18 warmest years on record have all happened since you graduates were born.
Okay, now here's where the conundrum comes in. Let's play clip number 2, because we're going to show you some of the people on Fox, and you're going to hear what they have to say. So, John, go ahead.
The problem with runaway global temperature is we're going on over 17 years with no global warming. And to put that in very simple terms, every high school kid today has not experienced global warming. Every elementary school kid today has only experienced a slight global cooling.
Proponents will have to grapple with the central fact, which I think Mark Morano laid out. There hasn't been appreciable change, increase in global climate temperatures in 17 years.
Now this presents a problem, doesn't it? I mean, this is a dilemma. Who are you gonna believe? The President of the United States or a Fox contributor that has a blog? All right, now, who should we ask? We should ask a scientist, right? But before we get to the scientist part, I want to go back to the definition of conundrum, and this is from your dictionary, and it says, this is called the Dictionary That You Can Understand, and it says conundrum is a situation where there is no clear right answer or good solution. A riddle that contains a pun. And they gave an example, and the example of the riddle with the pun is, what's the difference between a jeweler and a jailer? And the answer is, one sells watches and the other watches sells. Hey, I just read it. I thought it was adorable. So a jeweler sells watches and a jailer watches sells. All right, so now we're going to go to what the scientist has to say. So, John, let's have clip number 3. This is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Hit it.
There's just one final point.
Sure.
The last 15 years, CO2 has gone up by several points, and global temperatures have stayed stable or slightly declined.
Again,
Yeah, they have. But
here,
even the global warmists
the last decade was the hottest decade on record. Fact.
Not so. Not so, Bill.
Not so?
No,
what are you reading that I'm not reading?
No. You can both be correct.
2010.
No, you can both be correct in that.
Oh, shut up. No, I'm kidding.
What I'm saying is it can still be the hottest on record, but have leveled. That's still possible.
And this is what's driving the global warmists nuts, is because CO2 is up and warming is level to down. So I think the movement is in serious trouble.
Well, bet on it.
I bought a house in the Keys.
Did you?
Yeah, it's supposed to be underwater 3 years ago.
Yeah, just wait. Okay.
Guys, that was Bob Lutz, who used to be the CEO for General Motors, and he's a climate denier. You believe this? I mean, somebody that ran one of the biggest corporations in the world doesn't understand science, and he thinks it's a joke. This is what we're dealing with. I mean, these are the type of people we're dealing with, and that's what the whole show is going to be about tonight. It's going to be about science and about proving that global warming is real, climate change is here, and we're going to have to start doing something about it. And tonight we're going to talk, you know, we're going to hear more from President Obama. We're going to have clips from Fox special report, and I tell you, everything on Fox is special. Doesn't matter what it is, and it's always breaking news. Every time you watch breaking news, you know, when I was a kid growing up, the only time there was breaking news was if a plane crashed or if, you know, there was a major tragedy. With Fox, everything is breaking news. Hannity's coming on at 10 tonight. So we're going to play that, and then we're going to show the president, finally he's getting a set of brass ones, and he's starting to mock conservatives, and I love it. And the more he bada bings them, the more I like it. And it, you know, you want to get it to the point where it becomes embarrassing to become a conservative, because who could hide behind this stuff? You know, any person in their right mind is going to wake up and say, "You guys see what happened in Long Island just 2 days ago? They had 13 inches of rain. Guys couldn't get out of their cars. The Long Island Expressway was closed." I mean, you know, what about the insurance companies? Who's going to pay all those claims? Aren't the insurance companies getting to the point where they're saying, hey, fella, we got to charge you more? Why do you have to charge us more? Because of global warming? Oh, you mean global warming exists? Global warming's real? Oh, would you tell the simple folk? Like Uncle Joey. Uncle Joey kicked me off his blog again, guys. I wasn't walking lockstep with Shar. Didn't have my boots on, and I wasn't walking lockstep, and boom, right off the website. Yeah, they refuse to accept facts. But anyway, so we're going to listen to the president, and then the president's going to shame the deniers. And then finally, we're going to show you how the conservatives are able to get away with what they do. How they can claim that there's 17 years of no warming. And we'll show you the tricks and the deception that they use, so that when somebody says something to you, you can say, no, that's not the way it works. And believe me, you know, you get these guys, you hit them right between the eyes, and you got to get tough with them, because this ain't a joke anymore. And then, you know, we're going to talk about, you know, Michael Mann's lawsuit. Michael Mann is the scientist that came up with the hockey stick. We'll see how fast John is on his feet with this one. But he's getting ready to go to court. That's right. And he's suing the National Review and Mark Stein, and we're going to show that. And I tell you, when you see what's going on there, that's it, John's on the ball. But when you see what's going on, and how the Cato Institute got involved, and oh, we're going to go through the whole thing. You're going to say the Koch brothers, they refuse to quit. They refuse to, they have to make monkeys out of all the simple folk. Joe, I'm sorry, kid, but you're the one that refuses to accept the science, and I feel sorry for you. But then again, the fact that you repair oil burners, maybe you got a warm spot in your heart for the Koch brothers. You know, I doubt you're on their Christmas card mailing list, but you know, you keep walking in lockstep and you'll be on there. All right, so we're gonna go back to the beginning, guys, and we're gonna show clip number 4, which is really gonna be the full clip of the very first one where President Obama gives his whole spiel in front of the University of California at Irvine. So, John, hit it.
Burning fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide traps heat. Levels of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere are higher than they've been in 800,000 years. We know the trends. The 18 warmest years on record have all happened since you graduates were born. We also have to realize, as hundreds of scientists declared last month, that climate change is no longer a distant threat, but has moved firmly into the present. That's a quote. In some parts of the country, weather-related disasters like droughts and fires and storms and floods are going to get harsher, and they're going to get costlier. And that's why today I'm announcing a new $1 billion competitive fund to help communities prepare for the impacts of climate change and build more resilient infrastructure across the country.
Okay, now we're going to be fair and balanced, and we're going to show you Fox's special report. And now I want you to notice, this was, you know, Charles Krauthammer, who's a brilliant, I mean, he really is a brilliant guy. He's going to talk in this clip, and he's going to mention that he considers climate change a religion. And people think they believe in climate change. Well, Charles, let me tell you something, Charles. Climate change and global warming is not something that you believe in or you don't believe in. It's not like a religion. You look at the data, and the data tells you everything you need to know. Thermometers don't lie. Satellites always tell the truth. When you have a consensus in science, it's a consensus until it's proven wrong. Stop swimming upstream. Stop knocking your head against the wall. Come around, let's fix the problem. Let's at least start to address the problem. And when you listen to Juan, and God, I forgot his last name, well, he's one of my favorite, Juan Williams. Listen to what he says about extremes. The weather has never been so extreme as it has. A perfect example. Look what happened in Long Island just this week. When you get record-setting rains, when they start to become the norm, guess what? The climate's changing. All right, so now we're going to play the Fox special report. And guys, just pay attention, listen how they address everything, and then we'll talk about it on the opposite side. John, hit it.
Let's make clear, no single episode of weather, no storm, no flood, no drought, can be said to have been caused by climate change, global climate change, but the science is clear that weather practically everywhere is being influenced by climate change.
The problem with runaway global temperature is we're going on over 17 years with no global warming. And to put that in very simple terms, every high school kid today has not experienced global warming. Every elementary school kid today has only experienced a slight global cooling.
Two views about global warming. Never shall the twain meet. This as the president just touched down in the San Joaquin Valley of California. That's a part of California that not a lot of Americans know a lot about. It is not Hollywood. It is not San Francisco. But we all depend on it. That's where most of our food comes from. Something like 50% of the world's agricultural products come from that valley, which is undergoing a tremendous drought right now. Some, including the president, say caused by global warming. Let's bring in the panel right now. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard, Juan Williams, columnist for The Hill, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Thanks, gentlemen. Steve, let's start with you. The president making this proposal in California for a creation of a climate resilience fund to help communities prepare for the effects of climate change, a $1 billion fund. Using this for his own advantage to advance the climate change agenda?
No question. I mean, and you would expect the president to do that. But I think he will have to grapple, and climate change proponents will have to grapple with the central fact, which I think Mark Morano laid out. There hasn't been appreciable change, increasing global climate temperatures in 17 years. Now, the smart climate change proponents or activists will acknowledge that and say this presents a problem for the argument that we've been making over the several years, it's something that we've got to explain and grapple with. But there aren't that many, I think, intellectually honest global climate activists, and most of them are not, just choosing to ignore that and sort of shrug it off. But that is the central fact. If you're seeing increased concentrations of carbon dioxide, carbon-related pollutants, and you're not seeing another increase at the same level of global temperature, then you have a problem.
Juan?
Well, I don't think this should be a political argument, but it's become a political argument because so many people say, hey, you know, where's the basis for this? Look how the temperatures, for example, are so cold this winter, and right here in Washington, we've had a cold winter. I was joking with some friends the other day. I said I came outside. I said, it's pretty balmy, and then I looked, the temperature was like 32. I guess it changes. So anyway, I think the problem here is language to a large extent. I mean, clearly, there is global climate change going on. If you ask the scientists, the people at the National Academy of Sciences, you ask the people at NASA, what they present to you is not 17 years, as we heard in that clip, Doug. Instead, what they talk about is 100+ years, where you can see the trends, the patterns, and what you see is more extremes, colder temperatures as well as warmer temperatures. And what we're seeing in the Fresno, San Joaquin Valley area is, I think, a drought that is, again, more extreme than anything they've seen in decades.
Charles, Juan has said that this has become politicized. Is it fair to assume that the science of climatology has been politicized in academia, as has the rest of academia?
Well, absolutely, but even it's more than political. It's become a kind of religion. The essence of a scientific theory is that you can, in principle, refute it with empirical evidence. Otherwise, it's religion. It's a belief. And whatever happens, whether it's cold or warm, whether it's a flood or drought, whether it's pestilence or locust or any of the plagues, it's always climate change. So if it proves everything, it proves nothing. It's sort of the essence of the denial of scientific rigor. And, you know, we've now heard over the last week yet another example, apart from the drought in the west, is a snowmageddon in the east. 8 inches of snow in the East Coast. I've got an explanation. That's not climate change. It's called winter. And it happens every year. It's happened every year for a long time. And to me, it's just plain cynicism to seize upon any event and then to use it as an example of a theory, which is not a way to prove it. And this $1 billion, this attenuation fund, it is going to be exactly like the money that was spent on green energy. It is a slush fund for crony capitalism that will go to favored individuals and companies. It's going to apparently ameliorate the damage from natural events caused by climate change. Well, which drought is climate change? Which flood is climate change? There's no way to adjudicate that. It'll be political, as Juan was saying. The essence of this political, and ultimately it will be corrupt.
You described believers as looking at this as religion. Michael Crichton, the great novelist, wrote about this very, very eloquently, describing it how there's an initial Eden, a paradise, a state of grace and unity with nature. Then we fall from grace by virtue of taking a bite of the forbidden fruit technology, and we fall into pollution and all seek redemption because Judgment Day is coming. You want to tackle that, Ron? I mean,
well, I don't know how I think Michael Crichton actually became a doubter, and Michael Crichton
and was ostracized because of that in Hollywood.
Well, I don't know about that part, but I know that he became a doubter, as Doug was just reading. And my sense is that Michael Crichton was questioning the whole idea because there is such an overwhelming judgment by the scientific community. Today I was noticing
that gets to the point of funding, because critics say it's only because they're getting the funding.
I just don't believe. I mean, look, look, I think funding is a big issue these days in a period of austerity in general. But 97%, that's what the National Academy. And it's not made up. It's what the government says. It's not political. That's what 97% of climate scientists say. We are experiencing global climate change.
When was it done?
I don't know.
There's no such survey.
There is. It's National Academy of Sciences.
There's no such survey. There's no such survey. The California example out here is actually very interesting, because what you have is a government that's, because of the Endangered Species Act, has turned off pumps that send water from the Sacramento Delta down south and help provide water for the rest of California. Those pumps have been in effect, I mean, sort of on and off a little bit, but basically turned off since 2007. In 2010, it was one of the wettest years on record in California. That water that would have been captured in 2010 could have continued to provide water to California for those intervening years and continuing to this day, and we wouldn't be looking at this as the kind of crisis that it may turn into. And they're doing this to protect this delta smelt, and all in the name of protecting this small little bait fish. They've in effect redone California and its water. And I spoke with Congressman Devin Nunes before I came on tonight, and he said that the government kills more smelt looking for smelt than the pumps kill.
And there's also water
putting the water south
to try to recreate new places for salmon, which is their ancestral homeland. Apparently, there's some rivers in Northern California. More water being diverted, Charles.
Look, in the end, all the remedies that they talk about, Obama and the others, especially the EPA, wants to shut down U.S. coal because it puts carbon in the atmosphere, is utterly useless. The United States is 6% of the population of the world. With India and China and the other tigers in the third world developing, spewing carbon into the atmosphere, no matter what is done here, will have zero effect on climate. And that's why even if you accept all the climate science, all of it, there is nothing that we can do unilaterally in the U.S. other than destroy our own economy.
Out of time, gentlemen. You get the last word.
Guys, did you hear what Charles Krauthammer said? He said that 6%, the United States has 6% of the world population. Now, we're going to show you a chart that shows you, even though we have 6% of the population, exactly how much carbon, what percentage of carbon we put in the air. So, John, can you show us that? Nope, that's not the one. It should be 6200. Well, you're getting closer, but it's a very specific chart that we just put it on today. Came in with today's batch. Remember we went through it? Okay. Well, we're going to miss that. All right, but anyway, if he finds it, we'll put it up. But Juan Williams said that there's a 97% consensus. And Steve Hayes said that there's no such survey. And Juan Williams said, yes, there is. The National Academy of Sciences did the survey. And he says, I don't care what you said, there's no such survey. Well, guys, guess what? If you're going to believe that there's no such survey, what's the sense of talking to you? What is the sense of if you're going to deny everything, what's the sense of presenting facts to you? It shouldn't make any difference, right? I mean, you know, you guys, it's gotten to the point where you're just crazy. And I've lost all respect for Krauthammer. And I mean, that guy, he's genius level. But he's got one thing on his mind. He's got an agenda for the Republican Party, for the conservatives. It's really simple. John, did you have any luck with that? No, huh? All right. Anyway, we're going to move ahead to the next clip now. And this is going to be the president actually mocking conservatives. And I tell you, it's the way we got to do it, guys. You got to make fun of the people that don't understand science. You're really not. The idea is you want to embarrass them to the point where they finally say, okay, look, I'm going to stop being a fool. I'm going to stop being a denier. So, John, hit it.
President Obama spent a good deal of his time basically mocking Republicans for their denial of science.
When President Kennedy set us on a course for the moon, there were a number of people who made a serious case that it wouldn't be worth it. It was going to be too expensive. It was going to be too hard. It would take too long. But nobody ignored the science. I don't remember anybody saying that the moon wasn't there or that it was made of cheese. Today's Congress, though, is full of folks who stubbornly and automatically reject the scientific evidence about climate change. They will tell you it is a hoax or a fad.
So that's the part of the speech and the GOP climate change strategy that gets the most attention, the deniers. But if you look at top Republicans, they're rarely deniers. They know better than that. It's an embarrassing position to be a denier. So you've seen the creation of a bit more slippery and sophisticated of an excuse. Instead of saying they deny the science, they say this.
Listen, I'm not qualified to debate the science over climate change.
No, I'm not a scientist.
Neither he nor I are a climate scientist.
I'm not a scientist.
I am not a scientist. It's a meme which is true and popular even among younger, more reformist members of the Republican Party. In December, Senator Marco Rubio told GQ, I'm not a scientist, man, when asked if maybe the Earth was created in 7 days. On Saturday, President Obama turned his fire directly on this strategy.
There's some who also duck the question. They say, when they're asked about climate change, they say, hey, look, I'm not a scientist. And I'll translate that for you. What that really means is, I know that man-made climate change really is happening, but if I admit it, I'll be run out of town by a radical fringe that thinks climate science is a liberal plot, so I'm not going to admit it. Now, I'm not a scientist either, but we've got some really good ones at NASA.
Guys, I'm not a scientist either, but the one thing that I always say on this show, the people that I listen to when it comes to climate change and global warming are the climate scientists that publish peer-reviewed studies. And that's so important because the thing is, you're dotting the I's and you're crossing the T's, and if anybody can prove anything, it's those guys. And that's what we rely on. We rely on the people that know the science, that understand the science. And just to put a little more salt in the wound, the president's going to shame them even more. So, John, hit it.
Now, part of what's unique about climate change, though, is the nature of some of the opposition to action. It's pretty rare that you'll encounter somebody who says the problem you're trying to solve simply doesn't exist. When President Kennedy set us on a course for the moon, there were a number of people who made a serious case that it wouldn't be worth it. It was going to be too expensive. It was going to be too hard. It would take too long. But nobody ignored the science. I don't remember anybody saying that the moon wasn't there or that it was made of cheese. Today's Congress, though, is full of folks who stubbornly and automatically reject the scientific evidence about climate change. They will tell you it is a hoax or a fad. One member of Congress actually says the world is cooling. There was one member of Congress who mentioned a theory involving dinosaur flatulence, which I won't get into, but Their view may be wrong and a fairly serious threat to everybody's future, but at least they have the brass to say what they actually think. There's some who also duck the question. They say, when they're asked about climate change, they say, hey, look, I'm not a scientist. And I'll translate that for you. What that really means is, I know that man-made climate change really is happening, but if I admit it, I'll be run out of town by a radical fringe that thinks climate science is a liberal plot, so I'm not going to admit it. Now, I'm not a scientist either, but we've got some really good ones at NASA. I do know that the overwhelming majority of scientists who work on climate change, including some who once disputed the data, have put that debate to rest. The writer Thomas Friedman recently put it to me this way. We were talking, he says, your kid is sick. You consult 100 doctors. 97 of them tell you to do this. 3 tell you to do that. And you want to go with the 3? The fact is, this should not be a partisan issue. After all, it was Republicans who used to lead the way on new ideas to protect our environment. It was Teddy Roosevelt who first pushed for our magnificent national parks. It was Richard Nixon who signed the Clean Air Act and opened the EPA. George H.W. Bush, a wonderful man who at 90 just jumped out of a plane in a parachute, said that human activities are changing the atmosphere in unexpected and unprecedented ways. John McCain and other Republicans publicly supported free market-based cap-and-trade bills to slow carbon pollution just a few years ago, before the Tea Party decided it was a massive threat to freedom and liberty. These days, unfortunately, nothing's happening. Even minor energy efficiency bills are killed on the Senate floor. And the reason is because people are thinking about politics instead of thinking about what's good for the next generation. What's the point of public office if you're not going to use your power to help solve problems?
You know, guys, I asked our state rep, Dan Carter, I did a show with him, and I asked him about global warming, and I said exactly what the president said. I said, Dan, what would you do if your kid was sick? And 97% of the doctors said, get his ass in a hospital. What would you do? You know what he said? He said, well, I'd have to consult with who the doctors are, and I need to know more. Hey, there comes a time in your life when you don't need to know anymore. The science is settled. You're gonna act like a bonehead, like a blockhead, and you gotta come up with this problem. Oh, well, you know damn well you'd have your kid in the hospital. Don't hit me with that bull. All right, now, it's true, because now you're going to say, well, Rich, how do these guys get away with misrepresenting the science? How are they able to say what they do? They can say there's been no warming for 17 years. Guys, we're going to show you exactly how they do it, so just sit back. You might want to take notes, but you'll see. Now, this one's only 15 years ago. But every year it's the same. It's called cherry picking, and he's going to show you exactly how they do it, so that this way, when this comes up in the future and somebody says to you, the globe hasn't warmed in 17 years, you can go, oh yeah, bada bing, and you can tell them exactly what you saw on this show. So John, hit it.
I'm sure you've all seen this by now. Met Office releases new figures that show no warming in 15 years. It's a story in the Mail on Sunday, written by David Rose. The story has gone viral, being repeated in blogs all over the internet, without any of them bothering to check or verify it. Even though the British Meteorological Office issued a public statement correcting the Mail's story. Despite the Met Office having spoken to David Rose ahead of the publication of the story, he has chosen to not fully include the answers we gave him to questions around decadal projections produced by the Met Office or his belief that we have seen no warming since 1997. Oh dear, looks like Rose got the story wrong. He won't be making that mistake again. But yes, he did. Eagle-eyed viewers will have spotted that this claim about the Met Office admitting 15 years of no warming was made back in January. 9 months on, Rose has given birth to yet another story that looks like a carbon copy of the first. Global warming stopped 16 years ago, reveals Met Office report, quietly released. And once again the bloggers are regurgitating this without bothering to read the Met Office report, because if they'd tried, they would have quickly discovered that there is no Met Office report. The Met Office simply released updated global temperature data called HADCRUT 4, along with a 4-line description of how the dataset was compiled. There was no analysis or interpretation of the data at all. Rose invented this fictitious report in order to stamp his own interpretation on the data. And just as in January, the Met Office issued a statement correcting the Mail on Sunday story. As Yogi Berra would say, déjà vu all over again. The Met Office even took the unusual step of publishing its response given to Rose when he made some inquiries before writing his story. When Rose specifically asked if there'd been no warming trend since 1997, the Met Office responded, "There has been a warming trend." It even gave him the figure. It then explained the principle of determining trends and the pitfalls of arbitrarily choosing start and end points over a short period of time and drawing a straight line in between them. It tried to explain, just as I have in my videos, that in the short term climate is not only affected by CO2, but by other factors such as ocean-based oscillations. Almost none of the information the Met Office gave him made it into Rose's story. Rose simply made up his own interpretation of the data and made it look as though this came from a Met Office report. Then Rose proudly announced that, until today, this has not been reported. Hate to break it to you, David, but the reason no one else reported on this is because even other tabloid newspapers didn't have the balls to pluck all this out of thin air and then try to pass it off as the work of the Met Office. For Rose to do his own analysis is fine, as long as he and the Mail on Sunday make this clear. Just tell the world that a tabloid newspaper reporter with no background in science has concluded that global warming stopped in 1997, as far as he can tell, and let the world make of that what they will. If that admission had been made, I doubt we'd be seeing Rose's analysis plastered all over the internet and in the mainstream media.
Global warming ended 16 years ago. That's according to new data which shows...
No, that's according to an unqualified tabloid journalist who took a stab at analyzing this data himself. Why people still insist on unconditionally believing the Daily Mail, despite its appalling record of inaccurate reporting on climate science, is beyond me. And why anyone would want to send me a message claiming the Met Office has published findings that there has been no verifiable warming for 16 years, as if I would be so stupid and so gullible as to believe this quote without bothering to check it, is also beyond me. If I've emphasized anything on my channel, it's the importance of checking and verifying sources. Fortunately, most of the people who messaged me about the Mail story saw right through it and were sensible enough to check the facts for themselves. But I'm frankly getting tired of having to do the checking for all those gullible bloggers out there who simply repeat this stuff without checking it. Now, I'm sure the comments forum will be filled with a lot of amateur climatologists who'll tell me they've looked at the Daily Mail graph and it does look like global warming stopped in 1997. Well, I've made several videos explaining why experts see things very differently to amateurs, because the experts take into account various factors that are either not understood or ignored by the amateurs. So before you start giving me your beliefs and gut feeling about what the graph looks like to you, please visit these videos and find out how climate scientists calculate temperature trends. If you think the experts are wrong, then you have ample space on those video fora to give us the benefit of your expertise. My beef here is not with the tired old myth that global warming has stopped, but with the disingenuousness of reporters and tabloid newspapers that are willing to change facts to make a sensational story, and with the blogging blockheads who are willing to swallow their stories without a hint of skepticism. Look, guys, I admit I'm not very smart. I came bottom of my class at school. What I do on this channel is not superhuman. I use my experience as a science reporter to try to convey what scientific research has discovered. And when I read something that reports on scientific research, I check it. To climate science critics, any one of you could have checked the Mail on Sunday story. It would have taken just a few seconds to click on the Met Office website to see what this so-called report says, or even if it exists. Really, how hard can that be?
You know, guys, it's one thing to distort the data. I mean, you can do that to the data all day long. It really doesn't hurt anybody. But when you start to attack the individual scientists that compile the data, that's when it starts to get over the line. And Michael Mann, who's one of the chief scientists, the guy that wrote that started with the hockey stick, and believe me, all he did to come up with the hockey stick was lay out the data. The data did everything. He didn't come up with it. He didn't make the data make the lines. The data supplied the lines. And what did they do? You got places like there you go. There's the hockey stick. It's as plain as the nose on my face. And if you can't understand that, then you got a problem. John, you got any other charts up there? Because the one thing we love showing on this show is charts. You know, the other graphs, where we showed we had a whole bunch of them. There, guys, do you really need a college education to see that that's going higher? John, keep going. We have other ones, right? Yeah. Do you need to know that that's getting higher? If that was your company's stock, you'd be saying, hey, man, it's going through the roof. We're making, look at that. What, you don't need to be a Rhodes Scholar to figure this stuff out. So how can you be a denier? How could you look at that and say, oh, the globe hasn't warmed in 17 years. Take a look at the extended time frame. You can't miss it. So now they've come into personal attacks, and I tell you, this is going to make you sick. Because when you see what these guys have gone through, he was mailed a white powdered substance to make it seem like it was anthrax. He had to have the FBI, the CIA protect him and his family because he's reporting data. Why? Because because if people find out that the globe's really warming and we have to fix it, the 1% is going to have to pay. Is that a problem? You put the carbon in the air, but you don't want to pay for it? The shareholders aren't responsible for that? So let's see how evil these people are, and let's see if they make you as sick as they made me. John, hit it.
Joining me now is Michael Mann, professor of meteorology at Penn State University, also author of The Hockey Stick and the Climate Wars, Dispatches from the Front Line. And Michael, you are someone who was targeted for destruction because you're a climate scientist by this industry that includes big money activists and also just this strange, bizarre underworld of climate trolls who are the kinds of people, when Drudge links to an article, fill the article with 5,000 comments about what a hoax it was. What was it like to be in their crosshairs?
Well, it isn't what I signed up for when I decided to get a degree in applied math and physics and go on to study climate science. I didn't realize that I would be at the center of a widespread attack, an effort to undermine the credibility of not just me, but my scientific colleagues in a cynical effort to discredit concern for climate change. And so, unfortunately, it's part of the job description if you're a climate scientist today.
And it wasn't just that, in your case, that they tried to discredit your research finding. I mean, they tried to personally destroy you. They tried to get you fired. They tried to end your career.
Well, that's right. And if they hadn't done all that, I wouldn't have had a book to write about it, which, in which I describe these amazing experiences that I've had as a completely, accidental and unintended public figure. I've become a public figure in this larger debate over climate change because of this iconic graph that my colleagues and I published a decade and a half ago. And that has put me at the center of the larger debate about climate change, but it's also given me an opportunity, hopefully, to try to inform this increasingly poisonous discourse that we have over this issue.
Speaking of poisonous discourse, I'm going to stump you right here. How can there be snow when there's global warming?
Well, you know, we climate scientists actually have a technical term for this phenomenon. It's called winter. And, you know, we're going to continue to have cold days in winter. That's weather. But if you take a step back and you look at the larger picture, which is what climate change is, it's the larger picture, you see that over the last decade we've had twice as much extreme heat as extreme cold here in the U.S. If you go back a year, we had just set the warmest, the record for the warmest year ever here in the U.S. A month ago, we set the record for the warmest November the globe has ever seen. And as I speak to you today, and down under in Australia, they're experiencing a record heat wave. They have just announced that they had the warmest year that they've ever had. So it's that larger context. That's climate change, and that's global warming.
Can you explain to me, finally, what this Antarctica expedition is about and what is going on with the ice in Antarctica? I've seen the people that occupy this strange nether region of internet climate hoaxer trolls talk about the fact that there's actually more ice in Antarctica. What's going on down there?
Yeah, so it's another amazing observation. It's cold in Antarctica. It's cold down there. And, you know, there are some interesting scientific questions about what happens to sea ice in the periphery of Antarctica. It's actually a subtle problem because you can actually build up more sea ice when the oceans warm up and there's more moisture in the air over the ocean, over the overlying air. You can actually get more ice. And the climate models actually predict more sea ice over Antarctica, but that's a small increase. And you contrast that with, you know, more than a 50% decline in Arctic sea ice, which is the real problem, because there's a very large trend that's taking us in a direction where we will see the disappearance of the Arctic sea ice environment in a matter of decades if we continue on this course.
Although on the upside, we'll be able to drill for oil for there, so everything's sort of coming out swimmingly. Climate scientist Michael Mann, thank you very much. Joining me now, Sam Cedar, host of the
Okay, we're going to show you a clip that will, about the Arctic sea ice in a second, but before we do that, I just want to give you an update on Michael Mann's lawsuit against Mark Stein and the National Review. Now, Mann filed a suit after Rand Simberg of the Competitive Enterprise Institute wrote a piece referring to Mann as the Jerry Sandusky of climate science because he molested and tortured data in the service of politicizing science. Do you think they deserve to be sued? Oh. The libel suit is seen by many as a way for climate change advocates to silence opposition to their ideas and theories. But potential for squelching such public debate has united think tanks and institutions who see the libel suit as being unconstitutional. Can you believe these guys? Now, guess what think tanks are involved in this? The Cato Institute, the Reason Foundation, the Individual Rights Foundation, Goldwater Institute. I'm sure the Heritage Foundation is in. Guys, they don't stop. They don't stop. And I tell you, I love to expose them. I love to do it. Hey, You know, if you're going to lead with your chin, bada bing, you get smacked. It's that simple. All right, now we're going to show you the climate denial of the week, just to put more salt in the wound. And speaking of salt, you might need some salt when you see all the extra ice that's being created. But the climate models predicted it, but you'll never hear that on Fox. So John, hit it.
One of the key points I make in talking to people about climate change is that the canary in the coal mine of climate, the indicator that scientists all over the world have been focused on for the last few years, is the northern polar ice cap. Since 2007, the steady decline of the ice cap has accelerated rapidly, and scientists say we have entered a tipping point, with the ice cap racing perhaps 60 years ahead of the most pessimistic models. But of course, the deniers are ever creative, and I wasn't surprised when a recent email from a denier friend made the claim that ice was expanding at the northern cap. When I saw the same thing repeated in a comment on this page, and in a trashy denier blog, and heard it from a sweet little old lady at a church luncheon, I knew I had my crock for the week. Now, it's clear that the ice cap shrinks in summertime. In recent years, that shrinkage has been greater than ever. Of course, every winter, the ice freezes back, but over the last 3 decades or so, there's been a significant difference. Do we have a math problem? Many deniers can't seem to distinguish between area and volume. Let's take a look at the issue. You're looking at a color-coded map of the northern polar ice cap that I received from a research climatologist. The colors represent the thickness of the ice as determined by sophisticated sensors. What I want you to look at is the red. The red is the oldest, thickest ice, the so-called perennial ice. It's ice that has made it through many seasons and is generally several meters or many meters thick. I'm going to start an animation showing what's been happening to the ice over the last 3 decades, and I want you to pay close attention to the perennial ice. You'll be able to see the years going by on the lower left corner, and you can see the ice cap melt to a small extent in summer and then freeze back out to its widest expanse in winter. But are you looking at the red? It's going away. With each passing year, the perennial ice has been steadily deteriorating. As the winter ice freezes back, it tends to freeze back much thinner, more fragile, and subject to melting in the coming year. It's a downward spiral, a self-reinforcing cycle in which the Arctic ice continues to lose mass. When it freezes back in winter, it tends to look not so much like this, but more like this. So where do you go to get good data on snow and ice? Well, here's a clue. How about the National Snow and Ice Data Center? When you go check out what the actual experts say about the data, you get this. Because we had a cold winter, the public might think things have gotten better, but the loss of the perennial ice says they're not getting better at all. And 2008 represents the lowest volume of Arctic sea ice on record. And in addition, the Arctic ice is in its death spiral. So that's the difference between area and volume. But if you do want to keep track of the area of ice, the NSIDC keeps a running graph at their website. I check on it often, and here's what it shows now. For the current Arctic sea ice extent, defined as the water with at least 15% ice cover, here's the average for the period 1979 to 2000. You can see the extent shrinks in the summer and goes back up in the winter. Look at the difference in the extent of 2007 ice. And here's up to the end of 2008. So don't cheat yourself by going to secondary sources of information. Do yourself a favor and seek out the real data. These professionals do a good job of putting it in a form that ordinary, intelligent people can understand. And I want to thank you for all your support on this series. I hope you'll keep coming back and tell your denier friends. They don't have to live on the dark side. Just check out Climate Denial Crock of the Week and help us get the word out on the most critical problem of our time. Thanks for listening.
So guys, you see how they do it, and you see how they can be deceptive, and you can see how we're not going to let them get away with it anymore. And it's just knowledge. That's all. I mean, you know, the average person doesn't realize And the average person doesn't think that somebody would try to deceive them. You know, especially when you're watching, you know, a news broadcast. You would hope that there's, you know, journalistic integrity all the time. And speaking of integrity, we're going to come to the final clip tonight. Now, guys, this guy had as much of an impact on me as Elon Musk and Richard Branson and Lawrence Krauss and Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins. I mean, this guy, he was banned from TED, you know, the TED Talks, and it's a TED Talk on how rich people don't create jobs. Now, we know you can create jobs with solar panels because we went through that, but we're going to let Nick Hauser is his name. He's a multi-billionaire. So let's listen to what he has to say. So John, hit it.
It is astounding how significantly one idea can shape a society and its policies. Consider this one. If taxes on the rich go up, job creation will go down. This idea is an article of faith for Republicans and seldom challenged by Democrats, and has indeed shaped much of the economic landscape. But sometimes the ideas that we are certain are true are dead wrong. Consider that for thousands of years, humans believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. It's not, and an astronomer who still believed that it was would do some pretty terrible astronomy. Likewise, a policymaker who believes that the rich are job creators and therefore should not be taxed will do equally terrible policy. I have started or helped start dozens of companies and initially hired lots of people. But if there was no one around who could afford to buy what we had to sell, all those companies and all those jobs would have evaporated. That's why I can say with confidence that rich people don't create jobs, nor do businesses large or small. Jobs are a consequence of a circle of life-like feedback loop between customers and businesses. And only consumers can set in motion this virtuous cycle of increasing demand and hiring. In this sense, an ordinary consumer is more of a job creator than a capitalist like me. That's why when business people take credit for creating jobs, it's a little bit like squirrels taking credit for creating evolution. It's actually the other way around. Anyone who's ever run a business knows that hiring more people is a course of last resort for capitalists. It's what we do if and only if rising consumer demand requires it. And in this sense, calling ourselves job creators isn't just inaccurate, it's disingenuous. That's why our existing policies are so upside down. When the biggest tax exemptions and the lowest tax rates benefit the richest, all in the name of job creation, all that happens is that the rich get richer. Since 1980, the share of income for the top 1% of Americans has more than tripled, while our effective tax rates have gone down by 50%. If it was true that lower taxes for the rich and more wealth for the wealthy led to job creation, today we would be drowning in jobs. And thank you. And yet unemployment and underemployment is at record highs. Another reason that this idea is so wrong-headed is that there can never be enough super rich people to power a great economy. Somebody like me makes hundreds or thousands of times as much as the median American, but I don't buy hundreds or thousands of times as much stuff. My family owns 3 cars, not 3,000. I buy a few pairs of pants and shirts a year like most American men. Occasionally we go out to eat with friends. I can't buy enough of anything to make up for the fact that millions of unemployed and underemployed.
Guys, do you like what you hear? I tell you, I listened to a 20-minute clip and the guy blew me away. The guy got his act together and he's somebody that we should get behind. You know, my mother always used to say to me when I was growing up, well, you know, Rich, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Doesn't have to be that way, and we'll prove it to you next week. See you then, guys.